A lot of times economists approach media issues by asking, what are the fixed costs involved? Let me explain a bit how that works. In economic models, there's generally a distinction between fixed and variable costs. The fixed costs are given here by this horizontal line, and they're present at different levels of output, but the same. The variable costs typically go up as output increases. Examples of fixed costs would include something like rent. You need to pay the rent to open up a storefront at all. General startup costs, such as registering your business, or in the case of, say, radio, the basic broadcast facility, such as having access to a radio tower to be able to broadcast at all. Examples of variable costs, again referring to the radio station, would be wages for more or better disc jockeys, paying more royalties for playing more songs, or, say, investing in a better sound system. And these are called variable costs because they vary with either how much product you want to produce or how good a product you want to put out in the market. An example of high fixed costs might be, say, running a broadcast network TV station. Just to have a major network up and running at all costs a lot of money up front, no matter what it is you're going to do with that network. In contrast, an example of low fixed costs might be writing poetry. You can sit at home, you need a pen, you might need paper, maybe you need a word processor, but a lot of people can do it without having to spend too much money to get that writing done. High fixed costs typically mean fewer suppliers and also often a concentration of supply in some of the larger markets. You need the larger market to have a larger customer base to cover the expense of those fixed costs. So, for instance, expensive theatrical productions are much more common in New York City on or off Broadway than they would be in, say, Topeka, Kansas, a smaller city. This notion also helps explain why it is that people cluster, say for instance in New York City, because if you live in a major cluster, you will have some extra goods and services available because the local customer base is covering those fixed costs. High fixed costs, if they keep enough firms out of the market, they can mean market power for the firms that survive in the market. This can lead to partial monopoly, and sometimes it can lead to a degree of market failure. This is an important issue, but we cover it in more detail in our video unit on natural monopoly and two kinds of natural monopoly, but I'll just leave it at that for now. Watch the other video. There are many economic models which produce a result which a lot of media scholars find kind of strange, and in these models, basically, the presence of fixed costs will imply there are too many suppliers and too much product diversity. Here's an intuitive way to think about that. If you have, say, 3 firms in the marketplace, and each firm is paying those startup costs, well, it is perhaps the case that you could get an efficiency by consolidating those 3 firms into just one and paying those startup costs once rather than 3 times over. But note, the supposed improvement, it's a kind of central planning solution that assumes you can get the gains of competition by just having everything done in this one big firm in more of a planned way. It's not obvious that those gains actually can be realized through consolidation. Another argument why we might have too many products comes from an economic concept known as rent-seeking. Imagine that a company has 2 reasons for investing in new product development. One reason is to serve consumers, and the other reason is just to get some kind of monopoly position. Well, the reason serving consumers, that's an efficient incentive, but the desire to just get the monopoly position, that is generally an inefficient incentive, so it could be that too many resources are put into developing new products because some of it is motivated by this chase after monopoly profits. I would stress the dynamic gains of having a lot of new diverse products. In many economic models, there are worries about too much being spent on fixed costs, or perhaps too much being spent on the costs of product development. But I see the value of innovation as the key factor, and over time, if you have an innovative system, the returns from those innovations will overwhelm what you're spending on fixed costs or product development. If you read a lot of media analysts, the worry is often there's not enough diversity in media. In some of these economic models, the worry is there's too much diversity in media products, and actually I tend to side with the media analysts on this question. Another point of note when it comes to fixed costs is that in recent times they have changed rapidly. In many areas, fixed costs have fallen dramatically. For instance, it can be much cheaper to run an internet radio station than a radio station using traditional methods of broadcast. It can be much cheaper to produce an e-book than to produce a physical book. What's happening is that as fixed costs are falling in these areas, we're seeing more production, more diversity, and a greater ability to offer products which appeal to much smaller audience segments, again, because those fixed costs are lower. That's all great news, and indeed it has enriched most of our lives. It's also made online education a lot cheaper. But don't assume that all fixed costs are down. Arguably, it's the case that in some areas, fixed costs for producing a hit, a really big hit, actually they may be up. And in some cases, that's because marketing is a more difficult endeavor than before. Consumers only have so much attention, and as there are many more cultural products, to have, say, a big hit with a Hollywood film, you could argue that costs more money now than it did, say, 10 or 15 years ago. And if it costs more to even get started with the notion of having some kind of hit film, as you draw up even a preliminary advertising budget, well, that will make it harder to break into the film sector. One notable trend we see in Hollywood is a lot more of what are called tentpole franchises. That is, product lines or characters people already have heard of, like Spider-Man, or Lord of the Rings, or James Bond. This helps address some of your marketing problems. You can think of it as a response to the higher costs of breaking into the market at all with a big hit Hollywood movie. This topic covers many different angles of media economics, and there are a lot of different places you can go to look, including other videos in this series. But for basics, you could start by Googling economics fixed costs. There's also a very good text by Carlton and Perloff on industrial organization. There's a piece by Cowan and Tabarrok which covers some related points. That is available online. If you'd like an example of an economic model where there seems to be too much product diversity relative to an optimum, I would refer you to this piece by Berry and Waldfogel. It's one example of many, and that too is available online.